I've got a must-read for you, folks. The Federalist, you've heard of that? Wow. A certain column put it all in perspective for the folks, including me and including the president. Again, he tweeted this today. 5 more ways Joe Biden magically outperformed election norms. Did you know that Joe Biden was such a gifted politician? You know, after losing in 2008 and what happened in 1987, total disaster. Did you know he was this kind of political genius? All right, there's some circumstantial weirdness to his alleged victory. Let's go through them. Number 1, 80 million votes. That's more than any presidential candidate in the history of this country for Joe Biden. Now, on a lot of levels, it doesn't make sense. That is millions more votes than Barack Obama got in 2012. Barack Obama, he was beloved. Hold on. Barack Obama was beloved, and he only got, well, about 15 million less than he did in 2012. Let's see here. Donald Trump gained 10 million votes than he did in 2016. And you know, no incumbent has actually gained votes and lost re-election in about 100 years. That's pretty weird. That's very, very weird. But Joe Biden somehow pulled it off. All right, how about this? Lost most bellwether counties. A couple of things here. Let's start actually at the state level. Ohio and Florida went to Donald Trump. We haven't had a president in 60 years lose both of those states. But Joe Biden somehow pulled this victory off without Ohio and Florida. And if you look at these counties, there are certain counties, about 19, 20 of them, that every year, every election cycle, they pick the president, okay? Bellwether counties, we call them, you know? As Suffolk County goes, so goes the country. You know the deal. Well, there are, let's see here, 19 such counties across the country. 18 of them won by President Trump. Isn't that something? 18 out of 19 won by President Trump. That's pretty wild. That's pretty wild. Now let's compare Joe Biden to Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton actually did better than Joe in just about every city. Just about every city, Hillary Clinton did better than Joe Biden, except for 4 big ones. You notice anything about them? Let's go through them. Milwaukee, Detroit, Atlanta, Philadelphia. What states are they in? Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania. Notice anything? All right. What about that blue wave that I heard all about? There was a big blue wave coming, right? Democratic losses everywhere. Democratic losses everywhere indeed. And let's go through it. Congress lost 8 Democratic seats, and not one Republican incumbent lost his or hers. There were 27 toss-ups, 27 toss-ups. That's according to the Cook Political Report, when they can't predict a winner. Republicans won all 27 of them. All 27 of the toss-ups were won by the Republican. That's very, very interesting, very, very strange. Again, Joe Biden, if this is all true, he's some sort of political magician. Finally, Trump's primary. You know, he had to go through a primary. He actually did. And he did spectacularly well. He got 94% of the vote. Anytime an incumbent gets above about 75%, according to this, re-election is basically guaranteed. He got 18 million votes. The next incumbent who got anything like that was Bill Clinton in the 90s, and he got half the number of votes that Donald Trump did. That's pretty wild stuff. From the story, for Biden to have prevailed, it turns a century's worth of election data on its head. Huh? On its head. Joe Biden, is he really that good a politician? I don't think so. I think what made the difference here, mail-in voting. I mean, let's face it, Jimmy Carter raised doubts about it. We wouldn't have had it if it wasn't for COVID. States everywhere were just jamming this stuff in, jamming it in really, really fast. And we found this. Barack Obama had doubts about mail-in voting. Yeah, all the way back in 2008 when he was running for president, again, after just, 2 or 3 years in the United States Senate. Take a look at this.
People mailing in their ballots. Do you trust the security, the honesty of such an election process?
Well, I think we'd have to figure out whether this was fraud-proof. I mean, Oregon, for example, has a terrific mail-in system, but they've already scanned everybody's signatures who's registered to vote so that they can check to make sure that, in fact, the right people are voting.
Interesting stuff from a very honest back then and forthright candidate Barack Obama. All right, here's the deal. I don't believe them. I don't believe the mainstream media, and neither should you. They have misled us every step of the way regarding this election, and they've got a long, long track record of getting the biggest issues of our time totally, totally wrong. One of my favorites, or least favorite, I should say, and is very, very personal to me, the Iraq War. The Iraq War, 2002, 2003. Wow, what a complete and total disaster, right? Do we all agree? We had no business going into Iraq. It did not make our country any safer. But when it happened, well, the media just kind of stood by. In fact, it was the New York Times that told us they had weapons of mass destruction. The New York Times greenlit the war in Iraq, which, well, now we have thousands of veterans who have stumps instead of limbs, right? PTSD and every problem that goes with it. Not to mention all the lives lost, both American and Iraqi, and throughout the coalition. And the media, they just got it all wrong. And so did the Republican establishment. George W. Bush, he's suddenly a hero. He's welcomed again. Why? Because he hates Donald Trump. That's why. That's why we're hearing more from W again. What else did they get wrong in a big, big way? Which was a disservice not only to Democrats, but to Republicans, actually, especially Democrats. Do you think this helped your side if you're a Democrat and you're watching? The New York Times telling you that Hillary Clinton had like a 90 to 95% chance of winning the election in 2016, all the way up to like October. They were calling it. They had that silly little chart in the New York Times telling us how decisive her victory would be. And of course, we know what happened. How about this? Kavanaugh, the hearings, you remember what happened back then. Ah, boy, this was a low, low, low point. Christine Blasey Ford had no evidence whatsoever. She just had a dim recollection. Didn't know the month, didn't know the year, didn't know anything, didn't know the House. Yet the entire country stopped and watched her testify for, what was it, 2 days? 2 days. We watched that fiasco just because she said it happened. And she hadn't told anybody, and zero credibility, zero reason really to stop an entire country to say, look at this. And you compare that to how the media treated Tara Reade. You probably don't even know who that is. Tara Reade was a young woman in 1993, and in recent months, she came out and said Joe Biden sexually assaulted her. Now, they didn't take her seriously, the mainstream media. They went out of their way to ignore her or disrespect her or try to destroy her. Why? Well, she was going after a Democrat, plain and simple. She was going after a Democrat. She had a lot more corroborating evidence than Christine Blasey Ford, a lot more. She could actually establish that she worked for Joe Biden. She was an employee of his Senate office. I mean, that's something. That's significant right there. She told people in the early 90s that she was assaulted by this guy. Now, look, may or may not be telling the truth, but to totally ignore it, you compare it to what they did with Christine Blasey Ford, that doesn't make sense at all. Well, unless bias, all right? It's bias, and it's the media covering up for people they like and going after people they don't like. Here's another little item that, again, the mainstream media overlooked, but it looks like her mother, Tara Reade's mother, actually called the Larry King Show back in 1993. Christine Blasey Ford's mother lived in San Luis Obispo, California, called in and explained the problem her daughter was having.
Yes, hello. I'm wondering what a staffer would do besides go to the press in Washington. My daughter has just left there after working for a prominent senator and could not get through with her problems at all. And the only thing she could have done was go to the press, and she chose not to do it out of respect for him.
Or she had a story to tell, but out of respect for the person she worked for, she didn't tell it.
That's true.
Isn't that something? Wow. if Christine Blasey Ford had something like that, I don't think we'd have Justice Kavanaugh right now. But some are saying we have President-elect Biden. Don't get me started on that President-elect stuff. He is not President-elect. He's not. All right, finally, the biggest mistake they've made, and another reason to not believe them, the Covington kids. You saw what they said and wrote and did to those poor kids. I saw the video right away. First, I saw the headlines. I'm like, oh boy, these kids sound like jerks. You know, I just saw headline after headline. You probably did too. And then I watched the video and I listened to it. And I just saw a gentle young man looking at an individual who seemed to be taunting him. Nicholas Sandmann, right? Wow. What courage. What dignity. What dignity. So that's just a small sample. Why would we ever believe them? When they tell us that there was no voter fraud, no evidence. Yeah, there's one of the many headlines. Catholic school to investigate taunting of Native Americans. Didn't happen. Didn't happen. Yet they all wrote it. Fortunately, those kids are going to be very, very rich. A lot of those news organizations are settling up. All right, those are just some examples. I got something else I want to show you. If you really want to understand the media culture in Washington, D.C. and beyond, think back to when you were in high school, okay? You had the cool kids table, and then you had, you know, the academics, and you had the punks, and you had, you know, everybody kind of sat in their own little world. That's very much like the media. They kind of want to be at the cool kids table, or at least they're sitting around judging everybody. Who's cool, who's not. Right now, if you're a Trump supporter, if you think there's voter fraud, you're not a cool kid. Take a look at this. It's Mean Girls.
Nerds, cool Asians, varsity jocks, unfriendly black hotties, girls who eat their feelings, girls who don't eat anything, desperate wannabes, burnouts, sexually active band geeks, the greatest people you will ever meet, and the worst.
The Mean Girls, I gotta tell you, mean boys, mean girls, they're all over the place in the media establishment. I wish they were more like, not Mean Girls, but this movie that I really, really liked, The Breakfast Club. Do you remember this? At first, they all seemed very, very different to each other. You had the jock, you had the greaser, you had the punk, you had the preppy, you had the geek. And after a little while spending time with each other and talking to each other, they realized they had so much in common. The Breakfast Club, way back in the 1980s, but I think it still holds true. Unfortunately, many in the media, this is not their movie. They're more Mean Girls fans.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.